All right, good to see you guys again. We're doing two lives in 1 week, unprecedented for the group. But I was too excited, guys, and I did not want to delay getting this information out to you guys because, like I've mentioned in the last few weeks, I feel like we are going through a new shift in how the whole coaching industry is done. We are going through a shift in society and just in within history itself. And that has basically to do with all the crazy stuff going on in the world of artificial intelligence, all these new developments. And I have gone headfirst into this topic, guys. I have fallen in love with all the crazy stuff going on. And the deeper I have gone down the rabbit hole, the more I see that we are about to go through a giant shift, right? So the way I kind of like to think about this is, there was a time before computers were a big thing, and then a time after they arrived, right? There was a time before social media and a time after social media. And we are about to go through one of these shifts where if you can catch the change early and take advantage of it, it can supercharge your business. You can basically, you can save time, you can make more money and get more done, right? If you embrace this change in technology. And so I wanted to start to share with you guys some very practical ways of starting to use this in your coaching industry. And I didn't want to wait till next week. So, all right, guys, today we're going to be talking about how you can use maybe the most infamous and famous version of this in your coaching business, but how you can start to use ChatGPT in your workflow and just give you guys a 101 on how it all works so you can start to take advantage of it. All right, let me share my screen, guys. Here we go. Really quick, everybody, before we jump into today's call, let me know if you guys have tried ChatGPT. If you have, what do you guys think? If you haven't, uh, are you curious about it? Would you like to learn more about it? Right. So I'm going to just kind of set the table this way, and dive right in. So let me know, guys. What do you think? And let's get moving. All right. So, because this is a little bit of a primer, a 101 of ChatGPT, so to speak, for those who are unsure of what the heck this whole ChatGPT thing is all about, I want to break this down kind of in small pieces for you guys. So basically, ChatGPT is built on something called a large language model. I know it kind of sounds a little weird, but what a large language model, guys, is, or a language model in general, you can think of it like a computer program that has learned a lot of different things off the internet, right? So the first transformer based language models, you could say, came out a few years back. Um, and they weren't very powerful, they weren't very knowledgeable. They were more of a proof of concept that you could literally feed this program all this data from the internet, because the internet has tons of data, you know. um, and they discovered that the more data they gave it, the smarter it got, right? And so as they figured this out, they started training larger and larger models. And as the models became bigger and bigger, they became smarter and smarter, right? And so that leads us here today. That's right. Great at content creation, guys. Great at content creation. So, at the end of last year, OpenAI released now ChatGPT, which was built on their GPT 3.5, so kind of version 3.5 of their large language model, which had a bunch of new abilities. And people started to discover how, well, one, how crazy it was to actually have, a virtual assistant of sort that could do a bunch of things. But then it kind of just blew up, became the fastest growing application in history. millions and millions of people started trying this thing, and that leads us to today, right? So this was back in November of last year, and since then, OpenAI came out with an even more powerful, newer version called GPT-4, and we're off to the races, right? So all this crazy stuff going on in AI, and so a little backstory of what the heck ChatGPT is, and what's going on there. So you can just think of it as a very powerful computer program that learns from data off the internet, right? Super basic. So the next question might come up if you have heard about this is, all right, that's kind of interesting, Tate, but what exactly can this language model or this new really smart computer program, what can it do for me and my coaching business, right? So as I have been playing with, ChatGPT and the different versions of ChatGPT, the way I kind of like to think about it is you can think of it kind of like a super smart virtual assistant, right? So you will, it does not have a body, uh, but like a virtual assistant, you can chat with it online and communicate with it that way, right? And so this really smart AI virtual assistant can do a bunch of different things, right? So I just listed a couple of them for you guys, to kind of get the wheels turning. They can do everything from writing emails and proofreading your website copy, your sales page copy, and your landing page copy. It can even make recommendations, right? You could be like, read this, and how do you think you can improve this for me? And then once it's given you some ideas, you can actually ask it to rewrite it for you using its recommendations, right? So very smart virtual assistant, you could say. It can also help you as a coach to figure out who is your ideal client, right? This is one of those things I feel like a lot of coaches struggle with early on. They don't know who their ideal target market is. ChatGPT can help you with this if you know how to interact with it the right way, right? And then once you've figured out who your ideal target market is, you can also figure out messaging, right? How to communicate to these people in the right way. But the basic idea here, guys, without going too far down the rabbit hole, is turns out these virtual assistants, these AI virtual assistants, can be very helpful in all kinds of things, but especially things related to running our businesses as coaches, right? So, little taste there. This is the interface for ChatGPT. If you haven't tried it, there is a free version and a paid version. If you haven't tried it, I would highly recommend signing up for the free version of ChatGPT. You can just go to Google, type in ChatGPT, it'll give you the link. Free. The free version is running on the 3.5 version of ChatGPT. If you pay a little money, about $20 a month, you can get access to ChatGPT Plus, which gives you access to all the latest and newest features like GPT-4, which is pretty much the main thing I use these days because it's just smarter, more capable, and great to work with. So that's a little taste of what this crazy virtual assistant thing can do for you in your business, right? All right, here are a few things that I have learned about ChatGPT as I have worked with it now for the last few months and have tried to push it in its capabilities, figuring out, okay, how can I make this a useful part of my workflow and offload a lot of the boring or annoying things that I have to do in my coaching business, whether it's sales and marketing or client fulfillment or developing curriculum for my coaching program, this kind of stuff, right? And especially coaches, if you are a solopreneur, right? If you are a one-man band doing all the jobs, this is like having a VA, but probably smarter and essentially free, or $20 a month if you know how to work with it. But like, all VAs in the real world and virtual, you kind of have to learn how to communicate with it, work with it, do this kind of thing, right? And these are some high level points that I want to just walk through with you guys in terms of getting the best results from using GPT as a practical, useful component of your business, right? All right. So the first thing, everybody, if you're going to use ChatGPT as part of your business, if you're going to use this AI virtual assistant as part of your business, there's a few really important things you should know. The first thing is the more specific. So basically, it will do it'll try to do whatever you ask. And oftentimes, the more detail you give it, the better the result will be, right? So the point number one here is the more specific and the more context you give the model, the better the result, right? So it's kind of like, real people. If you don't tell them exactly what you want, you're going to get a general response that sometimes isn't very good. So if you can get really good at communicating exactly what you want, the better, right? We're gonna go through a real life example here in a second, and I will show you how this bears out in the results. All right, another really cool thing that ChatGPT can do is you can actually teach it new information, right? This is one of those things that I don't think a lot of people realize when they start working with this kind of virtual assistant. But you can give it text because it understands text, and it will learn whatever you're giving it, right? So originally, when GPT-4 was trained, it was trained up to a certain point, some point in 2021, I believe. And anything after that, it doesn't really have that knowledge in its database, so to speak. And so anything that happens after it, or things very specific to you and your business, you might need to teach it, right? So an example would be, let's say you want to analyze a coaching call you just had. You can, if you can get a transcript of your coaching call, different programs will do this. If you're recording your call, it'll give you a transcript. You can feed GPT-4 the transcript, and it will learn everything that happened in the transcript. And then you can ask it to do different things with this transcript, right? Give you a summary of what happened, analyze, the interactions between you, and make suggestions on how to do it better, all this kind of craziness, right? But the idea is you can feed it your relevant information, and it will do things with that relevant information. It's very cool, right? So going back to that example of checking your website copy, for example, you can scrape your website and get all the text. Then you feed it the text, for example, and it will analyze it, right? It'll analyze your text specifically, right? Not just generally, but your text specifically, and then offer specific examples exactly relevant to what's going on with you, right? So you can basically teach it things, right? Another really cool thing that it can do. The other thing is it is aware of what happened earlier in the conversation. So the way the current Chat GPT works is that it will remember everything within the conversation window, right? So you can kind of think of this like a text thread. Every time you start a new text thread or message thread, it basically starts over, right? It won't remember anything if it wasn't within that text thread. But if you stay within the text thread, it will remember exactly what it was talking about. And you can refer back to things that you talked about earlier in the conversations, and it will remember it. very powerful. However, on the downside, if you start a new thread and you refer to some other thread, it's not going to know what you're talking about, right? So very important, right? Another great thing that ChatGPT or GPT-4, it kind of interchangeable here, is great at is it is great at creating first drafts of many things, right? Almost like a real assistant or a professional. You're going to ask them to do something. They're going to spin up, a draft version, a first version of an email, a sales page, a landing page, whatever it is. You're going to look at it, and then you're going to do something with it, right? You're going to say, I like this, but I don't like that. Go do this, change that, start over, this kind of thing. So if you can think of, you know, ChatGPT in this way, it's going to be really helpful, right? It's really good at giving you a first draft and many, many different things. So kind of following up on that, the point we just talked about, everybody, is GPT-4 or ChatGPT works best when you work together. So going back to this analogy of telling your assistant to write you up, a first draft of your sales page, you're going to go take a look at the sales page, but then you're going to want to go back and forth with your assistant until you get it just right. And GPT-4 is really good at doing this, right? So you can ask it to do something and it's going to go do it. Then you're going to go take a look at it, and then you're going to go back and forth, right? You're going to say, you know what, this is great, but I need this to actually be shorter. It's too long. Please make this shorter. Please make this make the copy more exciting, more natural sounding. And the beauty of AI assistants, they never complain or rarely complain. They are always there available as long as the internet is working, so on and so forth. But you will go back and forth with them until you get to a really good place, right? And that's how that's how I want you guys to think about using ChatGPT in your business and your workflow. That's at least how I currently work with ChatGPT in my coaching business, and you can get to some really great results, right? Rarely will you just take the first draft. You're going to do a first draft, and then you're going to work with it back and forth until you get it just right and release it to the world, right? So that's kind of this last point, guys, of learning how to refine the first draft of whatever the thing is. All right. Let's do an example, guys. Since you guys have hung with me this far through the talk, let's go outside of this presentation. I put together a super simple example. Let me see. Can you guys see this? Let me know. Let me see. Here we go. All right. Try to zoom in here a little bit. So we are inside of ChatGPT running GPT-4. And I want to give you as an example of how giving it more information, being more specific, giving it context, and working back, going back and forth can get you some really great results, right? So hopefully you guys can see this. Let me know if you guys need me to zoom in closer or if this works, right? So here is an example where I am going to start with something very general and progressively become more and more specific in what I'm asking it, right? So I'm going to ask it, write me a meal plan, very generic, no details. So here it says, here's a 7-day meal plan that includes breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and 2 snacks per day. So it's just going to take it, it's going to run with it. It starts putting together a meal plan. Day 1, breakfast, Greek yogurt with honey, granola, and mixed berries. Snack 2, baby carrots with hummus. It's kind of funny how it just randomly chooses whatever it thinks without any details. So this is the request without any details, right? So it's giving me a meal plan for the next 7 days, for example. All right, so this would be my rough draft, everybody, of some request. Once again, guys, this thing can do all types of requests if you start to play with it. So, All right, now I'm going to give it some more context and more detail. I just want you guys to see how this works, right? So now, I'm literally talking to it like I'm kind of talking to another person. It is really good at understanding natural language, and you're going to want to speak to it like you're talking to a virtual assistant, essentially, speaking your language. So now I'm going to say, now write me a meal plan for a pregnant woman with gestational diabetes and tell me why you chose what you did with a sweet smelling air. Now, thankfully, ChatGPT is very good at deciphering your misspelled English, but I'm going to ask it a little more specific um, request and throw a little bit of a curveball, right? Not only is this woman pregnant, but she also has gestational diabetes. Please give me a meal plan for this person, right? So happily, ChatGPT is going to give me a meal plan for a pregnant woman with diabetes, right? So here's a 7-day meal plan for a pregnant woman. Here we go. Pregnant woman with gestational diabetes. This meal plan focuses on controlling blood sugar levels by emphasizing low glycemic foods, healthy fats, and lean proteins. All right, here we go, guys. You look here. So breakfast, we're going to do scrambled eggs with spinach, bell peppers, and avocado, 1 slice of whole grain toast. Snack, small handful of almonds. Anyways, so as you guys can see, if you read this, it's going to rewrite the meal plan, except it's going to write it for a pregnant woman with diabetes. Very cool, right? So very powerful. It did not take any time for it to do this. It just went to work. All right, now we're going to push it a step even further, right? All right, so here's the meal plan. All right, here we go. We're going to push it even farther, everybody. So my final request here is now do this for a pregnant woman with gestational diabetes that is also vegan, and tell me why you chose what you did. So not only is this woman pregnant that has gestational diabetes, but she's also vegan, right? So I want a menu like that, right? Like what's crazy is it'll actually come up with a plan, right? No complaints, no slowdown, just boom. So this is an example, guys, of where the more specific the request, you want to ask it exactly, tell it exactly what you want, and don't worry if it's complicated, because it'll just, take your request and just do it, right? So here it is. So here's a 7-day meal plan for a pregnant woman with diabetes who follows a vegan diet. So the meal will focus on these things: plant-based proteins and healthy fats. So anyway, so basically it's going to tell you why it's going to do what it does. And here we go, guys. Day 1, breakfast, chai pudding with unsweetened almond milk, topped with sliced almonds and berries, small handful of walnuts, lentil and vegetable salad with mixed greens, cherry tomatoes, cucumbers, and avocado, olive oil, and vinegar dressing. Anyways, the point is, everybody, it took exactly what I said and ran with it. Now, another, word of caution, everybody, that like people and like the internet as a whole, you should not just take everything that ChatGPT gives you as the truth, as real. So you're going to really want to think about this critically, so because sometimes these language models can make things up, right? And so you want to, verify, confirm, definitely use your critical thinking skills when it comes to this, guys. But with that said, it is smart enough that it will get the answer right most of the time if the topic is fairly general, right? Fairly general, fairly, something that is out on the internet that it could learn. So anyways, this is an example, guys, of going back to this right here. The more specific you are, the more context you give it, the better result you will get. And I gave you a little bit of an example of going back and forth, right? I started with something general. I wanted to narrow it down and then narrow it down again. You're going to want to refine and refine everybody to get the best result. All right, guys. So this was a very high level conversation about ChatGPT. But it is not the end and not the last conversation, everybody, that we're going to have, because I got some big news next week that I'm releasing to the group, to all my coaches, related to this whole AI thing, right? So if today's talk was interesting, if this whole subject matter interests you and piques your interest, you're going to want to stay tuned, guys, because I got some good and juicy in the wings for next week. You're going to hear all the details. And hit me up in Messenger, guys, if you guys want to chat more about this. Drop comments in the comments if you have thoughts, suggestions. And I can't wait to enter this new era with you coaches. All right, guys, have a great week, and I will see you guys later.